and I got scholarships for my public speaking and all of those things. But my grandfather told me never to get them at the expense of family and rest. And that was something that really drove me. And I guess my whole life I've prioritized that downtime. And so when I give my answer, like, yes, let the kids explore with their passions, I'm raising my kids where family first.
Welcome to the Homeschool Perspective, where seasoned homeschooling moms share tips, insights, and resources to empower your homeschool journey. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Homeschool Perspective. Today, we are diving into a topic that's sure to spark some lively discussions. Should we aim for our kids to be well-rounded in their education, or should we encourage them to specialize in their area of interest? Is it better for our kids to dabble in a bit of everything, become little Renaissance people, or should we nurture them in that one passion that they can't stop talking about? And guiding them to become experts in that chosen field. So we're here to weigh the pros and cons and share our own experiences and maybe even challenge some conventional wisdom along the way. So whether you are already specializing or intentionally choosing a more well-rounded approach, we think that this will be a fun and thought-provoking episode. So grab a snack or get to that laundry pile and let's jump in. All right, guys, what are your initial thoughts on this? Do you think that we should encourage our kids to specialize in an area of interest or aim for being well-rounded? What do you think?
Yes.
Yes? Yes to both?
I mean, every kid is different.
Yeah.
So every approach is different.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can't, I mean, if we're giving our children the freedom to be who they are and we're empowering them to take ownership of their education, we have to be prepared to equip them whichever track is best for them and whichever one they choose.
That's good.
What do you think? The first thing I think of with this is club sports, club teams, and these like very early club teams. Because I remember when right around the time my oldest was being born, there was so much discussion about young kids having chronic stress injuries and concussions and things because they were playing these like the same sport all year long and they were playing it. And I know this is a huge thing for families and I'm not knocking anybody who chooses this path, but it does make me, I remember listening to these stories and these articles of people talking about, 7, 8, 9-year-olds who are specializing playing the same sport all year round and how it was really destroying their bodies because it wasn't made that way. And I remember my husband and I sitting down and we're like, okay, we're not going that path. Like if they find something they're super passionate in and they really want to do, we'll make sure that we prioritize that season, but they'll do it for that season. And we want them to be trying other things as well. And I remember having that conversation because it was just so jarring to me to consider that people were going so all in at such a young age that it was actually changing children's bodies.
And their brain chemistry, because there have been studies since then about traumatic brain injuries that were not even picked up because the brain is, soft matter rattling around in this hard case. And every time it rattles, it affects your brain performance.
Yeah.
But to me, if our kid is passionate about a sport, like we actually have kids playing floorball right now, which is a sport I'd never even heard of until my kids got into it. And we just ask them to use wisdom. So, our 18-year-old, he practices all the time, but he's done research on it. He understands what part of his body he has to strengthen with what type of exercise. And of course, it's the whole body and different types of exercises for each part. And I've heard about it he has spent hours explaining this to me and the type of nutrition that feeds him. But, my 7-year-old, my 9-year-old, my 13-year-old that enjoy the same sport, enjoy it a little more appropriately for their age, even though they're just as passionate about it. And so what I've challenged them to do, because I had a similar concern of young kids with sports, was, well, what does an actual athlete do? Like, right, they play for a season, they train for a season, they rest for a season. So let's use wisdom and model our habits after these people who already do it successfully.
Yeah, I had a similar experience as you, Allie, with looking and seeing what was going on in our area. And, we signed one of my kids up for baseball and, he was little and we showed up for practice the first day and these dads are coming out with like all these dads, all this practice equipment. They had these things that we had never seen. I played Little League when I was a little girl and Chris played Little League. He played, we both played sports when we were young. He went more the athletic route and I went more the musician route. But we were both like really involved, but we were shocked to see these dads showing up with specialized equipment. And we're like, whoa. We instantly knew this was maybe not the league for us. This was not the route that we wanted to go, because we wanted our kids. I didn't want my kids to only be good in baseball. So a little bit different than what you were saying about like their bodies and how it affects them. Although, I mean, that is a huge concern. But I just didn't want them to only be good at one thing for just a short, small amount of time. And what if they lost that interest? Then, you've put so much effort and practice, and you've shown up for all of these, and you've played year round, and you've done all of this work. And then if they don't want to do it anymore, do you keep them doing it because now they're good at it and you've kind of led them down that specialized route, but now their interest isn't there anymore? And then why are you doing it? You know what I mean? And there's nothing to fall back on in that area. So we've taken a more generalized route with our kids. But it's actually kind of hard to find teams and sports that are that perfect balance with kids that want to be general. There's teams where it's just, bleh, like it's just like, we're just playing for fun. And it's like, I don't know if I want that, but I also don't want the other end of the spectrum where it's like, go hard or go home. So I don't know.
I am so fascinated that you went right to sports with this, because when Rachel was asking the question, my brain went to academics, because for us, sports are extras.
Okay.
Right? So they're not a
Yeah.
part of their educational journey. They're a part of their experience,
Mhm.
but not their educational journey. I think they give great life skills. So I was thinking, when you're talking about like specialists, like I have a kid who's totally focusing on music right now. I have another who's totally focusing on art. And I have another who just wants to read all the books about all the things and doesn't want to be hemmed into one topic or subject, just wants to learn everything the world has to offer. So it's fascinating to me that you guys went to sports with it, and
I would put music and art. I would put music and art in the same boat as sports when we're talking about this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would too, because I was thinking theater. It's the same problem with theater. Like my kids are into theater, and there are children's theater places that they have the kids up until 10 o'clock at night every night the week before, and you're there for 5 hours every night, and they have they just like tons of pressure on who's going to be this and that, what they're going to look like, and it's too much. But when you're thinking about academics, when I'm thinking about academics, because we like to expose our kids to as much as we can. And if they have an area of interest, we look for an opportunity for them to explore that interest. When it comes to academics, I want them to be well-rounded thinkers. Mm-hmm. So when we're looking at our academics, when we're laying out our curriculum, it is really important to me that they are getting exposure to lots of different ways to think and look at things, which means math. Even though I have a kiddo who hates math and is like, why do I have to do this? Math is so important for learning how to think logically and learning how to think in systems. We want them to be well-rounded there, but I do let the approach for how they demonstrate learning be guided by their area of interest and their area of passion. So like I had a kiddo who his book report, he did a book report, a history report, and an example of multiplication arrays, all in Minecraft, because he wants to build video games and things like that. So I think, we give them the opportunity to explore those things they're passionate about while still keeping exposure to all the different things, because it's so easy to get your identity completely wrapped up in one of these things that you're doing. And I've worked with so many high schoolers when they're going to college and, they get into a great college, but maybe not onto the D1 team or they, or something like that. And it's their identity got so wrapped up in, I am a baseball player, I am an actress, I am this, that they're really, once you get to that level where you tap out, they get heartbroken. Yeah. Completely heartbroken.
So what I hear you talking about is exclusivity. And what I'm thinking of is specialization, because still learn all the basics, right? They still have all the exposure to all the things, like when you're getting your college degree, but you have more courses in the thing that you're passionate about. So we don't let our kids exclusively study one thing because they're young, they're too young to make that decision at 8, 9, 10. Once they're into high school, we totally let them narrow it down more because we believe that we're preparing them for a career basically from 14 on. Hoping, I mean, my hope is always that they become entrepreneurs like their mom. I mean, who doesn't want their kid to have their own company, right?
Yeah.
But that they get to niche down and specialize, but not to the exclusion of other things.
I don't think it's that. I had this was my childhood, and I feel like I'm still tired from my childhood. That I would, I tell this to everybody. I feel like there's just a kind of a pattern of going hard and then like the next generation going a little easier, and then my kids will probably have their kids take a more specialized route because I feel like I'm just still tired. I started off in a lot of different things and doing a lot of different things, and I don't think I was I wasn't exclusive in anything. I did dance and I did sports and I did music. I took piano lessons when I was really, really young. But when I kind of got into fifth grade is when I started the flute. And from there, I started taking private flute lessons, and I was taking private piano lessons, and I was still involved in some sports, and I still did dance. And so over the next few years, my parents were like, you need to make some choices here because you're involved in a lot. And I kind of I didn't do dance anymore, and I focused on flute, and piano was a requirement. So flute and piano. And I eventually got into our youth orchestra, the San Diego Youth Symphony, and I was playing in several different things. I took private lessons. I did my competitions. Oh man, I love to compete, and I was like really, really focused on the competitions, and not just competing that, but because I went to a small school before I switched to homeschooling, I was doing everything. Like if you did one thing, you did everything. I was in choir. I was in small ensembles. I was in large ensembles. I did handbells. I learned the organ. Okay. I learned the
Okay.
organ so that I could compete in a piano organ duet. And we won second place. That is the only, like I played organ for like a good, 9 months, maybe at best. But I learned it so that I could compete and win. And I even competed in academic things. Like I won our state science test, it was like, let's go. And I did like readers theater and everything. And I was a very passionate and and driven teen. And I did all these things. And I wish that I don't know. I don't know if I wish that I had not done those things because I love those experiences that I had, but it was just like this I don't know, like if I could, I don't know what I would do if I could go back, but all I know is that it wore me out. And I did the same thing to myself in college and stuff like that. And I have my siblings, that had similar experience growing up to me. One of my sisters said that she wishes that she had had focused more on sports and had the opportunity to even pursue more athletics and things like that. Instead of music so much, she felt like she was being very specialized or driven to specialize in music. Now all three of us sisters have our degree in music education. And my brother doesn't, he's an engineer, but it's just interesting how we went down that route and it just kind of snowballed. I think, a lot of it was just driven by our natural passions and interests at the time. But then looking back, it's like, oh man, I wish I would have had more experiences and maybe been a little bit more careful before just going all in on those types of I don't know. I just all in on that.
Yeah. My childhood was very similar, and I was a very driven kid. So I ended up touring the country
Yeah.
in singing and acting and dancing. Like
Yeah.
I was on the debate teams. I was winning all the competition. Like
Yeah.
I was on student council. And then I was homeschooled.
Oh, we
and
would
I
have done
just started doing
great
more
together
Oh,
as a team.
can
Man.
you imagine? We would have taken more. Uh, we totally would have. But I mean, like,
Oh,
I got my first job at Cold
please.
Stone. Lisa's like, what's wrong with you? I got my first job at Cold Stone and I was, 15, whatever. And I was working when I was not on tour. And I ended up going to being the manager and opening new stores when I
Sure.
was a teenager.
Of course.
Insane, insane. But the thing, when I look back, I'm like, I drove most of that. My parents were really like trying to be supportive of this person who was coming in like a fireball. I was like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And I was successful at it. The thing that I look back on and the thing that I'm so protective of with my own children is that I wish, and my parents are wonderful. I had a wonderful childhood, all the
Mhm.
good things, but I do wish that there had been more proactive sleep and time that I was not allowed to do some of these things, where
Mhm.
I could have had time to think and process and explore maybe some different things
Yeah.
and not just be running from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. I mean, I don't know how much sleep. I mean, we were just talking about with academics and things, losing sleep and getting sick over and just like constantly going. And I agree. I'm still tired. I'm still
Yeah.
tired from that and I'm still trying to learn and set myself up mentally and physically to be able to not live that way. But
Yeah.
I do wish there had been more protection over rest and time to ponder and time to wonder and time to consider other things. Because once you get that, like you said, the snowball, once it starts going, and especially if you have a kiddo who's on fire for it,
Yeah.
or in some cases, if the parent's on fire for it and makes it continue going, there's just no room. There's no room for anything else. You just keep going. So that's the piece when I look back. I'm like, I just wish there had been more protection over rest, over making sure we had time
Mhm.
to consider another path,
Yeah. I
to
So
calm.
I
I'm
totally
I'm
agree with
so
that.
curious here. I'm clearly seeing how our different backgrounds and childhood experiences are affecting our perspectives today.
100%.
And I think this is one of the first times where we've been really different in where we're standing. But I'm fascinated by this because did your parents not make you take like a day off every week and set boundaries for sleep and health and
No.
stuff?
No.
Okay, so like
We
my
were
kids have the
winning.
We
freedom.
were. If
So
we weren't winning, we were making money.
Yes.
I wow. So this is fascinating to me because in our family we have a Sabbath day every week, and it's not like a religious thing where it starts like at a certain time at sundown, like some of our friends have. But I believe that scripturally God set a standard that we take a day off, and so in our family it's Wednesday. On Wednesdays we rest. And it's so funny because I worked the other Wednesday and took a different day off because of a project I was compiling, and my kids were like, "Mom,
Mhm.
like it's your day off." And I was like, took yesterday off instead because we had company. So I'm working today. I made a choice to, but so they can pursue anything. But we have a thing where technology goes into flight mode at 9 p.m. because screens are, we're not going to be like this all night long. And it's so cool because my adult children do it voluntarily now. But I lead by example. I model that. Phones go away 9 p.m.
That's good.
We sit, we visit together every evening in the family room. And if you're home, you come join us if you want to, or you can go off by yourself if you want to, whatever. And every Wednesday, we're all off and we're all home for family dinner.
Hmm.
And that is a hard and fast boundary. And so I think maybe that affects my ability to say, sure, let them pursue their passions because I know that they're pursuing them with boundaries. You
There's
know what I
just
mean? It's
when you get into
different.
these clubs and you get into these things, like you don't get to pick your day off. Like our
Yeah.
in San Diego, the symphony rehearsed on Sunday afternoons, and we would do at the church we were at, we had church in the morning. We lived an hour away from San Diego, so we had church in the morning. We had to leave before, like, at the end of church often, race down to San Diego because you don't know what the traffic's going to be like. Anybody who's lived in
Mm-hmm.
California, Allie, I know you know this. And then we had Sunday night church, and so we were so after our
That's
4-hour
why we
rehearsal,
pick
whatever it was,
Wednesday.
it was a long rehearsal. We would race back, and so that was our life. And so we did not even get Sundays as a rest day. So I mean, but it's just that's the way it goes when you start to get into these more specialized things.
Mhm.
And I've just been very protective of my kids, making sure that they are well rounded because I'm sure at some point they will specialize. I'm sure like we're
Yeah.
getting, one of my kids is really getting into swimming, which I love as a swimmer. You know, my husband played sports and that's where he was like, his mom talks, I think his mom is still tired from the kids being in high school because she always talks about how they never sat down for a meal because they were all in sports and they
No.
were all over
That.
the state.
Mhm.
All doing, because they lived in northern Michigan where it's just, you know, there's, you got to drive, you got to get to the
Yeah.
places. There's not that many schools up there. And so they were all over the place, never sitting down for family meals. Fast food was the on the go. That was the thing. And it gets to that point, and you do. It would be great if you can set boundaries and take breaks. And that's why I think it's so important. Like Allie was saying at the beginning, to play the sport during the season, but maybe not, you know, year round club sports you know, and to take a more training schedule like athletes do, where they have
Mhm.
their on season training and then their off season training and then their rest season, you know, like they train like that, and to have those different rhythms and things in place. Um and that's doable, I think, for sports for sure.
Mhm.
And the fine arts, though, I don't know, there's not as many,
I
you
think,
cannot take a break from practicing your instrument,
yeah.
or
But
you
you
know.
can make a window for when
Yeah.
you're going to compete or when
Yes.
you're going to, you can say, we're only doing. The thing is, too, I think we have to recognize is this is extremely counterculture. It's like the moment, like you were saying, the second you step into this world, the
Hmm.
second you get to a competitive team, whether it is in fine arts, sports, debate, like it doesn't matter what it is, the second you enter that world, this shifts. And what we're talking about doing, making sure we never ate dinner at home like
Yeah.
that. We didn't even eat dinner together as a family unless we had guests. Like it was not, my parents were running a business that was open 6 days a week. They were photographers. So literally Monday to Saturday, they were open. And we were running around like the moment school was done, went before we homeschooled, the moment school was done, we started doing all of our activities. And then once we were homeschooling, I was touring. So I was in rehearsals or I was getting my schoolwork done. Like we didn't even spend a ton of time together because everyone was doing their stuff. So I'm super protective over dinner time
Hmm.
and bedtime. I'm extremely protective over those two things. But this is extremely counterculture. When you enter one of these things and you say, well, we are not going to do the competition that's over Christmas weekend. Like, that
Hmm.
kind of like you come in and like, we are not participating in that part. There is a big pushback. There is a big pushback. And so, like you were saying, finding a place or finding places that are helping your child to grow and wanting them to learn the skills well and appropriately while also allowing them to have a childhood and have respite is really challenging. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's something that has to change.
Hmm.
It's got to change because we're not healthy. Like, our nervous systems, you're hearing it everywhere, right? Our nervous systems are totally shut. Like, this is not healthy. I always say, uh, I'm in a biblical story, but the Mary and Martha story, I'm like, I'm stuck in Martha mode. I've
Hmm.
been stuck in Martha mode my entire life. And that's not meaning that like I'm always doing, 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 doing. There's never that rest and think and be.
Hmm.
And I think that's something that we as a generation of parents are really trying to resolve, but it is counterculture. And so I feel like people are going into two camps where they're like, we're not participating in any of it, or we don't have a choice. So here we go. And
Yeah.
I think we've got to have this conversation because I don't think either are necessarily the best path.
Hmm. I I started spark schooling honestly to balance this, to try to balance this with homeschoolers, because that idea, especially in the homeschool community, if you're going to do music, the
Mhm.
answer is piano lessons. And I don't think that every child should do piano lessons. Honestly, like kids, if they don't want to, I teach private piano lessons, and I have kids in my studio that don't want to be there, you know? And so like there needs to be this middle ground of where you can do art, you can do music, you can do it, and you can learn rhythms, you can learn notes, you can learn art, you can learn sports, you can learn, you know, all of these things in like a relaxed environment. My whole
Mhm.
my whole goal for my elementary age kids was relaxed environment, low pressure, and relaxed environment. And the research and things that are coming out supports this, because these are, there's this great book that I read called Range by David Epstein. It's talking about being a generalist and the benefits that come from being a generalist. And even in the introduction, it talks about the different childhoods that Tiger Woods had versus Roger Federer, and how even Roger Federer's mom was a tennis coach and was like training these, like really good tennis players. She insisted that he go and try and be a part of a lot of different things. And she like restricted his tennis time. She would not let him play tennis. Whereas Tiger Woods, obviously, out of the gate, like he was like golf, golf, golf. And they both, were they both are amazing athletes, but it doesn't. And in the book, it also talks about musicians. There's this amazing violinist. I cannot remember the name. She started when she was 18, and she's world renowned, a violinist. But, most violin methods are going to insist that you start at age 2 on this little teeny tiny 1/16th size of or even smaller violin, and you are playing Suzuki method, and you're doing Mississippi hot dog, like I have 4 siblings that started on the Suzuki method. No, 3 siblings. I only have 3 siblings. That all 3 of them played strings, and they started on the Suzuki method. So, although they would say the same thing about me starting flute. They have jokes, but it's like, they encourage that Suzuki method, encourages that early, pursuit of that. So I think that there is, room to explore all of these things and to get a general understanding and a general background in sports and in art and in music and in, all of these different things, speech and debate and theater and all of these things, dance. So many things. Get a basic understanding and in a low pressure environment. And then they're going to find, and if they find something and they latch onto that and that becomes a passion, then you've got to go where we're talking about now, is like finding those pockets of time, those that you are protecting, and just being very, very intentional of not letting it take over your life. Even though it's just hard to do when the kids get into middle school and high school. But that's where it starts. That's I feel like that's where it should start. I don't know. Like, do we have to always be starting at, age 2 and age 4 and 6, like pushing our kids towards specialization? The research is saying no. But I know that it's still so hard, as families.
Yeah, and I don't think we should push our kids to specialize. I think we should let them choose. And I've seen it done well. So you guys both had like negative experiences with it, but I've seen it done well in families where specialization does not mean, like I said, it doesn't mean exclusion. It still means one day of rest. It still means family time. Like passion with purpose and intentionality. That's what we should be teaching our children. And I do think it's okay to let them specialize if we're looking at it in a way that is healthy.
At what
Because
age,
it's the same
though?
thing.
At what
You know
age?
what? If right now I've got a kid who's specializing in art, but they're still doing English and history and math and science because those are required. And their extra time, if they want to spend it on that, let them spend it on that. Children naturally, in my opinion, in my experience, children naturally stop when they're done. If we're not driving them, if we're just saying, oh, that's so cool, but we're not like, hey, you could do better, or did you see this? If we're letting them let their interests lead, it will fizzle out if they're tired of it, or it will fuel itself if they're more passionate about it.
I think the issue comes in when you get involved with things outside your home.
When you're paying.
It's like once you have a mentor, once you have a teacher, once you're a part of a team or a cast, I think we have to acknowledge that being the parent there when the culture is so where the culture glorifies self-sacrifice for a team, or like self-sacrifice isn't bad on its own, but like I remember I was I think it was in Japan, but we had a show and there was a news crew coming to like take pictures, and I was practicing in a mirror in a dance room, and I was doing pirouettes, and I broke all 4 toes on my right foot.
Oh no.
Broke them. Just
Oh my
not
gosh.
good. And I was praised and like glorified because I slapped a smile on my face. I taped them up and I did the same routine for the news crew 10 minutes later. I was probably 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, my parents are so proud, right? Because everybody, and I want to say this with so much love and empathy for them and for all parents who are in this
Right.
position, because your child just did, they have grit. They have fortitude. I don't know what that was. Fortitude. They, they have passion. They're committed. They're doing, like, we as a culture look at things like that and we're like, wow, that's
And
amazing.
those are
And then you have,
great. Those are great things. Those are not,
but it's
things to
so
look.
easy to, yes, but
Mhm.
it's so easy to be unhealthy. And parents who are trying to allow room for their kids to pursue these specializations, pursue these passions, and getting up into those competitive or professional levels, the amount of work, they're literally holding up a tsunami trying to, like, I just want to acknowledge how
Yep.
challenging that is as a parent
Mm-hmm.
to not only push, because if my parents had been like one day, you know what, this is too much, you're taking the next tour off, the amount of pushback that I would have given would have been astronomical. And I would have had every argument, and I would have had tons of support for my argument to not take that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to hold space for and acknowledge like how challenging as a parent it is to be in these situations and hold back that tide and say, we'll participate to this point and you will get kicked off. Like they will kick you off and out of these classes and these mentorships and these teams. And that can be devastating. So I don't think
Especially
there's a solution
when
here,
there's
but
colleges and college
oh yeah.
scholarships on the line. That's another thing that's a huge driver. My kids just picked out instruments, band instruments, and they picked out the baritone and the French horn. And immediately the store owner said, "Well, there's your college scholarships." And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh, like pressure, to get them, But those are like it's
They're needed instruments in the
they are
orchestras.
needed
Yeah.
instruments for the
Yeah.
for the orchestra. And so while that may be true, I don't necessarily want my kids to go down the same path that I did, without the passion behind it themselves, without that continued passion and it being their choice and being driven in that area. But you're right, there's not a good solution for this. And
There should be.
there should be, but it's just the culture that we're in, and I don't know. I don't know because I remember my cousins were like so involved in sports that they couldn't come to like family Christmas and stuff, and we kind of like looked down on that, but at the same time we were doing the same thing with
Mhm.
music and fine arts, and not to thankfully there were some good boundaries with the things that we were involved in that didn't require over holidays and things like that. But it's just easy. It's just too easy to get sucked into that world of specialization. And I think that at some point, if you are passionate and you are driven, that needs to happen if that's going to be your career, if that's going to be your focus, or if it's going to lead you down um, a path for whatever that career is. There's a lot of things that I was passionate about in high school and even college, that I didn't go into school for, or that I didn't end up specializing in, but I use those skills that I
Mhm.
learned every single day.
Oh yeah.
Did I have to go so hard in high school to get those skills? Probably not. But I use them every day. There was just I had so many interests and I had so many, passions and things. And yeah, I did end up focusing on music and went into that as my career, or as my with my degree and my career. But I have used those other things. So even though college, I didn't go to college or get degrees in certain things, have a career in it, I still use those skills. So that speaks to both, I think, generalization and specialization, because it can go either way for both, whether whether or not you go into that as a.
I do just want to take a minute though, Lisa's face when listening to us. Well, no, but I think there are families, I think we should talk about it because I think there are families who are listening to this. If you had a childhood where this wasn't a part of it,
Mhm.
and I think too, it's part of where you grew up all over, but there's places in the United States where like there is no other option. Like this is what is happening. And so a lot of families, especially in the homeschooling world, are just opting out of it all.
Mhm.
They're like, nope, because they have to work so hard. You have to work so hard as a parent to participate and hold those boundaries. But Lisa, I'm like looking at your face. I would love to hear what you're thinking right now because this seems like.
Okay, so you know how you have those moments in childhood that are like defining for your future? My grandfather had it was like their small spare bedroom. It was actually my aunt's room when she was a little girl. And he took it over and it became his den. And it was like a treasure trove and he kept it locked and it was like a huge honor to be able to go up in it and look through and hear the stories behind all the things in it. It was like all the stuff that my grandmother didn't want all over the house or that was like stacked messily. Like it was like Aladdin's cave for me as a kid. And I found this little necklace charm. And on it, it said Man of the Year Award. And it had the date. It was in the 1950s. And he gave it to me and I wore it as a necklace. I still have it most of my life. And his story and my grandmother's story about that award are so different
Hmm.
that it's mind blowing. So the organization that gave it to him, his business, he talked about how hard he worked to earn it and how much time he put into it and really everything he was doing. My grandmother grew up very privileged. My grandfather grew up very poor. He became very wealthy. He was a self-made man. And this was part of his journey. And they came to the house when he was at work one day with dozens of roses and I think it was like a bottle of champagne and chocolates and stuff like this, like, and gave them to my grandmother to thank her for supporting this man of the year. And she said, "Thank you very much," shut the door and just put everything on the counter and walked out and went back to her day. And when my grandfather got the award and came home, she was like, "That's fantastic, but you weren't man of the year here at home. So next year, that's where I want you to be man of the year. I want you to come home more and I want you to do things with your kids." And he said that moment changed his life
Hmm.
and it changed his priorities. And it was such a moment for me hearing that I've always tempered my passion and my drive because I'm incredibly competitive. Also, like I did competitions. I did Bible quiz competitions and speech meets, and I got scholarships for my public speaking and all of those things. But my grandfather told me never to get them at the expense of family and rest. And that was something that really drove me. And I guess my whole life I've prioritized that downtime. And I have no problem looking someone in the eye and saying, you know what, if there's a competition or a production, because I've done the plays and things like that, I will give you these like 3 weeks where I will give up my Sabbath rest, but the rest of the time, these are the days I'm available. And I've turned down opportunities based on those standards since I was like 14 years old. My mom was sick. I was raised by a single parent. She didn't have a lot to offer financially. She couldn't do anything. She was on disability. So anything I did, I funded myself or my family, like my grandparents helped me. And I was often too proud to ask. You know what I mean? Like, so I did a lot of it myself. And so I learned that drive. And so when I listen to you guys talk, I think, wow, because that it would never enter my head to do that.
Hmm.
And so when I give my answer, like, yes, let the kids explore with their passions. I'm raising my kids where family first. So our rest day is Wednesday, but it's because it's the day that we all came together that we agreed we could give up. So we have no sports practices that day, no commitments that day. And my adult kids, they make their own decisions, right? Like I make the decisions for the children. But it was so cool. I heard my 20-year-old the other day say to someone, "Oh, yeah, thank you for letting me know you changed the date on that. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it that day." And they were like, "But you were supposed to be our event photographer." She said, "Yes. And I committed to being there on Saturday. You moved the date to Wednesday and I'm not available."
Hmm.
And she's like, "And I told you I'm not available on Wednesday." She's like, "If it had been ahead of time, maybe I could have shuffled it and we could have had family dinner a different day, but that's my day off and with my family." And that was like her value system. And so I think we're just coming from such different places. And you talk about it being countercultural, and I guess it is, but I don't think I ever grew up culturally relevant.
Hmm.
Yeah, I grew up in New York, but I've always been a rebel. Um, I've always been kind of a hippie, if you will. Like I grew up near hippie communities and things like that. I think that really influenced me a lot too. I'm very I'm very driven in a very chill way.
Hmm.
Like I will push myself. I will go without sleep. I will exhaust myself to do a launch, to create a product, to create a resource until Wednesday.
Yeah.
And
You
then
are
we stop.
good at those
Like,
boundaries.
Yeah.
You really are.
and
Mhm.
so when we talk about this drive with the kids, I'm like, yes, let them run because I know they have Wednesday. I don't care the other 6 days. If they want to do it, let them do it.
Yeah.
But we always sleep enough. We always eat together one day a week, and we always rest one day a week.
These are lessons that I think me and Allie still need to learn. We're still working on learning. No, I mean, for real. Because when Allie was talking about that earlier, about wishing that she had prioritized rest or been encouraged to prioritize rest, I was like over here, like, yes, like I had a great childhood too. Like, my parents know, nothing on them. Like they did a great job. You gave me tons of opportunities. So, so grateful, so thankful. But you didn't talk about rest. Like it was praised to not rest. It was, I woke up on my books in the middle of the night, because I was trying to get my homework
I was
done.
working so hard.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, and I didn't have time for my homework, and still got great grades. And like it was like this thing, But I
My
had
only all-nighter
scoliosis.
was when I read Gone with the Wind cover to cover.
Like it was because you wanted to.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I had straight A's, but I would get
you-
up early. Yeah, I was an A+ student. I think my lowest grade was a 94.
Oh my
Except for biology. I got an 89 in
Overachiever,
biology,
Kristen.
and I cried for like 6 months.
Oh, we're one to talk.
I know.
I can't say that.
No, I got an 89 in biology, and I'll never forget it. It was devastating to me. It took my ranking down from being in the top 10 to number 25 in my graduating class of 525, and I've never quite gotten over it.
We can tell.
So, like, you know what I mean? Like when you work that hard.
Yeah.
But I really, in one semester of college, I worked so hard because I had 2 jobs and I was paying my way through school that I got mono. And I realized, no, I have to go back to my boundaries. So like I've learned the hard way. The few times I've neglected them, I've paid for
Lisa.
You are one of us.
You are one because I got mono.
Yeah.
I didn't stop.
I was 17. It was my first semester in college.
I would get they would do this is like why I have health issues now. They would do injectable antibiotics so that I could get back up faster.
Oh.
I slept through that entire semester of college. We were required to go to our classes, and I told all my professors that I have mono, and the only way to not go to class was to go to the infirmary, and I didn't want to go to the infirmary, so I was going to come to class and sleep. And so I did, and I did not. I had 20 some credits that semester because I was trying to get done faster. And I was still practicing 12 hours a week or 10 hours a week, whatever was required of me. And I did not rest. I did not. So
see, and I think that's the difference.
That is the difference.
But I saw my mom get sick with a debilitating illness. You know what I mean? Like, and I know that had she taken care of herself earlier. So I think having that example, it's made me prioritize my health.
It's interesting because the women in my family all had, and I don't want to say who this was, but had debilitating illnesses, cancer, things like that happened throughout. And I remember the overall tone of those moments being, okay, I'll take a quick rest.
Yeah. No, my mom never stopped.
Now I have an excuse. I have a reason to take a quick rest. And getting back to their normal thing was still, that was the same through line.
Yeah. Okay, so I feel like if
all of us,
anybody's listening to this, we've got to take this chance to use our voices and change the culture, at least in the homeschool communities. Yeah. Like we can do better.
Yeah. I think prioritizing rest, prioritizing health. It wasn't until, I was married to Chris, who's a personal trainer, that I really started to see how little I prioritized health. I've always been healthy looking, and I've always, been, healthy as far like healthy-ish, I would say. And, but I have scoliosis, and there was never any, like when I was going in high school and I was wearing a back brace 23 hours a day, they said you could take that off for an hour to exercise. I did not. And there was no, like And like that wasn't on our radar to do that. I
Yeah.
got that thing off and I had no working back muscles. And so I've struggled my entire back, like adult life to keep my postural muscles in place. But it wasn't until I was an adult looking back, like, oh, I could have been doing something about that during that time. Like
Mhm.
during that rest time, during that time when I was supposed to be strengthening my body and resting and recovering, it didn't happen. And I think that this is like the main takeaway from this episode is protect, like whether you specialize, whether your kids are passionate or just doing the well-rounded thing, both are fine. I would caution, I think all three of us would caution into specializing too early. Just the data that's out there, all of the research is pointing to that. Even that it's not necessary to become elite in these areas
Mhm.
as adults.
Yes.
That you know whatever path you take as a family, prioritize the family, prioritize that time together, set the boundaries for rest and for taking care of your body, your kids' bodies, and have that be the overarching goal of whatever path that you take in this. Do you guys have any other takeaways or things that
Teach them to
how you would sum it
rest.
up? Yeah.
Teach them to rest before they crash. Like, don't let them become tired adults. There was a
Like
study that
us.
I read. I remember reading a study. It was actually in a book that we had to during our first adoption. Like one of the social worker gave us some books to read. And it talked about how sleep deficits from the teenage years affect adults into their 50s
Mhm.
and to prioritize sleep. And, we were encouraged because when you adopt kids out of trauma and because any kind of adoption is trauma, like no matter how beautiful it is, right?
Mhm.
It happens because of tragedy. And
Mhm.
to really prioritize that rest because trauma makes the body even more exhausted. But like listening to all of this is kind of traumatic for kids.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
I don't, you're talking about like elite behavior. And I'm thinking specializing is letting them pursue a single minded drive and intensity, all of the art and creativity that they want to, or all of the history books. And so we're looking at it so differently. So I
Yeah.
would just say teach your kids to take care of themselves and their relationships in their lives above any passion.
Well, and to add to that, I'd say make sure you're praising that
Mm.
as much as you praise whatever
Performing.
they're exploring.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think, when a child comes to you and they're like, my body is tired and I don't feel like I can do that today. Pray, like, I'm so glad you're listening to your body. Now, it doesn't mean, and when you praise that moment, it doesn't mean you're praising them becoming lazy or, all of that. I
Mhm.
think we all have so much tied up in that, but we need to be praising, like, I'm so glad that you decided to set that aside and go for a walk. I think that was brilliant. Or I'm glad you decided to sleep in this morning. Like, good job taking care of yourself. I think we need to be praising that just as much. And obviously, it depends on our kids' personalities, but I think children in general, they're seeking that confirmation that the action they're taking is helping them become a grown up.
Mhm.
And
Get
so
praising.
if we're
Yeah.
only praising the go, 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 get it done, get it done, get it done stuff, then they're going to believe and be wired for, and not just believe. And the thing is, this is personal experience. And I think there's a lot of us who can say this. Their bodies will physically rewire to
Mhm.
only live that
Mm.
way. And we are learning so much now about how much damage that causes physically that I
Yep.
think an actionable thing we can all do right now is to praise that in our children and try to do it for ourselves. But just start with praising your children when they listen to their instinct on that.
Yeah, I think we need to praise character. We need to praise self-care and we need to praise values more than we praise performance all the time in all the things. So even
Mhm.
if they're like you guys were with the drive and that stuff, it's not I'm so glad you won that competition or I'm so glad you hit this melody or whatever,
You
right?
worked so
It's
hard. That's
I'm
the big
so
one.
glad that you honored your commitment. That's great. How are you going to take care of yourself too? right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Give them those questions.
Or
How
I'm
are
so proud that you didn't take on that commitment. I
Right.
think
Yes.
that's like,
We
I'm
had a
Yeah.
so
party
proud
the
of
other
you.
day, like a
Yeah.
little mini dance party for my kid saying no, because
Mm,
that kid's a
yeah.
people pleaser,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
it was such a big deal for them to say no to something that I was like, we're gonna celebrate this. And they're like, I didn't do anything. I'm like, exactly. Like, that's the win.
Yeah. It's hard. This is such a hard topic. I mean, because I'm listening to you and I'm like, yes, praise that, praise that. But if you had told me that in high school, I would have been like,
Yeah.
no, I'm going because I
But you were a
didn't,
part of a culture where that was valued, and
it
we get to
was,
change the culture in our homes.
yeah. Yes, I'm hearing what you're saying and I'm saying yes. But
Okay.
I, as a person, I don't,
I wouldn't have seen it either.
you could not have gotten me to slow down.
Yeah,
I
I
was
would.
praising myself for if no one else was praising me, I was praising myself. Look at how much I am able to handle. I am,
Yeah.
I was
Mhm.
doing that and I am good at all these things. And look,
So then, yeah, then the bigger thing is that we start healing it and adjusting it
Yes,
in
it is.
ourselves
yeah,
because more is caught than taught,
yeah,
right? And then pray that they're
yeah,
going to get that,
yeah.
and we'll keep praising them whenever they make a decision. But we have to work on it on ourselves so that we're not continuing to model for them that that's the only way. Because you also think generation. I know we're getting long here, but the all the studies and things that are happening now are on generational trauma. And
That's what
if
I
you had
wanted to
women in
bring
your
back in.
family, yeah, if you have
Yeah.
women in your family,
Yeah.
because I look at, the two generations of women before my generation in my family, and I think for many families, they were, it still are, they're incredible women,
Mhm.
incredible women. First female, my great aunt was the first female law partner in her industry, right? My grandmother built a business from scratch in her living room with her four, they just incredible, incredible women. But they were at a time where there was no, like, you had to work, women especially had to work so much harder, so much bigger, so much stronger in order to accomplish things. And I think that that trickled down to the next generation where it's like, well, we're going to fight to have all of it. Now
Mhm.
we're also going to be mom 100% of the time. And we're going to be this 100% of the time. And so we've got at least, at minimum, two generations of women before us who that was the only way. And honestly, I'm so grateful they did it because it let the pendulum swing in a way where now, but now it's time for us to find more balance in that.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's a generational component to this, I think,
Yeah.
is all I wanted to add.
We need to heal ourselves so that we can raise kids who are healed and whole and not healing from the childhood we gave them.
Yeah.
Oof.
Even if you
Absolutely.
look back and you say that was a good childhood.
It was a good child.
Yeah. Yeah. But
It was,
but it
but we want something
but we
different.
want something different that's more that prioritizes rest and prioritizes family,
Mhm.
and just the needs that we've been talking about. So, guys, this has been such an amazing conversation. And if you are listening, and we would love to hear your perspective as well, please, please, please leave us some comments on this and reach out to us either on Instagram or on our website. We would love to hear your perspective. Please follow, share, and subscribe to our podcast, all the things, please, so that we can just continue to bringing you all of these perspectives around homeschooling, and around family life and culture that and all of these things that affect us even now. So thank you again for being here. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next time on the Homeschool Perspective.